We are breaking open the head today. Hello from LA. I was just out in California at Music and Sky Festival. Originated, a few years ago. I met a lot of influential people there in the freedom movement, the health freedom movement, and I sort of had my impromptu book launch for Big Pharma, Guess It Quacks Like a Duck. The book is finished. So while I'm out here, I thought I'd play this recording of my appearance on the Terrain Theory podcast, where I talked about the potential benefits of seeing a therapist. I hope you enjoy. If you feel like you're becoming more confident and competent in your ability to make decisions in life and deal with the consequences of those decisions, then you've probably got a good therapist.
Greetings and love, beautiful humans. How's your 2024 going? Aliens in Miami? Secret tunnels in New York City? Fauci admits 6-foot distancing, not grounded in science, but we thought you were the science. The new year is off to some start. It's enough to make you scream or cry, or maybe just find someone to talk to about it all. Which brings us to this week's episode. Brother Mike and I invited Antony Sammeroff back onto the show to talk about his area of expertise, therapy. Therapy has always carried a stigma for me. I attended one group session as a young teen after my older brother died, and I couldn't get out of the room fast enough. But the truth is, I probably should have stuck around. Chatting with Antony opened my mind to the myriad benefits of having a therapist, an unbiased, neutral party who listens without judgment or prejudice. He took us through a few of the forms of therapy that are out there, their pros and cons, why he approaches therapy the way he does, and how you can apply some of the techniques of a therapist to your own personal life and relationships. We've really grown to love and appreciate Antony's voice in this terrain space, and we were delighted to have him back on. Hope you enjoy. Welcome back to Terrain Theory. Okay, we are live. Antony Sammeroff, welcome back to the Terrain Theory podcast.
Thank you so much for welcoming me back. It's a great honor to be on once, so it must be, I guess, duplicated, or maybe it's a function, like it multiplies. It's several times as much of an honor, spiraling into multidimensional fractals.
All of that, and maybe we call it a Christmas miracle.
Oh, okay, great. Even better. It's a little bit, yeah, it must be around then by the time this comes out. Okay, great to be back with you guys. Thank you for having me on the show. Hello, audience. I hope if you don't know me, I'm Antony, but you will soon.
Yeah, Antony, you're in Florida now.
Oh yeah, I just arrived here yesterday. I've been in Scotland for the winter months for the first time since 2018, I think. But yeah, it was getting really cold, so I've got some stuff coming up, a couple of appointments coming up in this side. So I'm going to be in America for just under a week, and then I'm going back to Mexico.
You're in a good part of America this time of the year.
Yeah. It's nice. It was really nice lying out in the sun. I haven't seen much of that in a while, and it's not so hot that my fair Scottish skin is melting off my face.
It looks good to us. Antony, one of the reasons that we wanted to bring you back on is to talk specifically about really your profession, your career, your expertise in therapy. And I guess the question that I wanted to kick off with is, who are the kinds of people who would benefit most from therapy? Like, is this an instance where everyone should have a therapist? How should a person look in the mirror and go, yeah, I should probably go to therapy?
Well, okay, that's a pretty big question, and we do have those kind of glib memes in society. Everyone should go to therapy, and if you don't want it, then you probably need it, and that can sometimes be true. But I guess a good way to approach the question is maybe how can you benefit from therapy? How can a person benefit from therapy? And I guess if you think about it that way, you might know if you're the kind of person who might benefit from that. Do you know what I mean?
I think I get what I get what you're saying, but for someone like myself who's never been to
Oh, you've never
therapy,
been.
I've never been to a therapist.
Mm.
Yeah, it might be hard for me to go. Well, I don't know what that end goal is because I've never experienced it.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. And we are the way our mind works, we prefer to know what outcomes are and the kind of coaching which I do quite a bit of as well. But to be fair, but the online sort of coaching sphere really got into this like let's make it drill it down and see what your outcomes are and are you going to how do you measure your progress and are you going to take massive action and I think for a lot of people that's quite intimidating as well. But the thing that is difficult is to measure something so ephemeral as the psyche, like because our psyche we go through natural cycles of feeling better, feeling less good. Sometimes it's good when you feel less good because you feel like you're really diving down and pulling stuff out, and you're going to use that stuff like manure to fertilize your soul. Sorry for the woo woo rainbow unicorn picture of it. But so it's difficult for people to grasp, what exactly am I going to get out of this? So um, I think there's a lot of different layers from this. One thing is to organize the on the most fundamental level, the most basic benefit you might get is to organize the content of your mind better, right? So, you've got all of these things flying around, and life is not linear, and the way that we keep information in our mind is sort of in this patchy cobweb of interrelated patterns. So, when you get to speak to someone, you can take that big complex spider web and you put it into some semblance of a reasonable order where you feel like you understand it on a more profound level, which makes it easier for you to act on the wisdom you've already gained or that you're trying to draw from the challenges of your life or even the good stuff that's happening, your everyday experience. You want to assimilate that experience so that it's under you, so that it's integrated into you, and you can walk the walk, so to speak. So that's really the most, I would say, cosmetic benefit. And to some degree, you can get that from uh, taking a nice walk. Nietzsche said all great ideas are conceived of by walking and thinking it through, or journaling, which I think forces us to put it into a linear fashion. Probably if you went across the road and spoke to a lamppost every day for 10, 15 minutes, that would also help you organize the content of your mind. But it's good to have a human there. It's good to have a human that knows how to listen without having a particular agenda that they're going to act on you. Yeah, but, or brings in their own experience, makes it about them. There's about 100 different ways that family and loved ones who care for you might intervene when you start to have this um, well, a lot of the time people speak to vent because they're trying to figure out what they mean while they speak. And the closer someone is to you, the less apt they sometimes are to fulfill that function because if they're close to you, they want what they think is best for you, and you're part of a system. You're constantly exchanging energy and information backwards and forth. So they include you as part of themselves. And because they include you as part of themselves, it's sometimes, not always, hard to get the same quality of support from them, especially if it's anything about them. So here's another role I play. Because people are in these complex systems and they're sometimes having arguments and disagreements, or how much should I say? What do I have the right to demand? What's my boundaries? What's their boundaries? It's really good to have someone that acts as a valve to that system and takes some of the emotion out of the system. Um, not you can't give it. You can't do it with your spouse sometimes because you're just passing around the energy. You're giving it to her. She's got nowhere to go. It goes into the kids, then it goes back into you, and the sort of temperature on the stove, so to speak, never comes down. So another element of it is emotional catharsis. If we go one deeper than that, um, a really important discipline, and this was really introduced in the 60s by and earlier than that, 50s, by the humanistic psychologists, is the idea of listening to with the intent to, especially Carl Rogers, who I'm a huge fan of, but more on that later. Listening with the intention to really understand the other person, not just analyze and come to a conclusion. Everyone wants to analyze you and tell you what's wrong with you and what you should do. But what I have noticed is beyond the emotional catharsis, there's something that people get, firstly, from really being understood by someone else. And secondly, having that, well, first of all, just someone listening with the intent to understand, even if they don't get it. Secondly, if they can demonstrate that understanding, these are skills that have become second nature to me, and I practice them in all my relationships. When I'm getting to know strangers, when they speak to me, I often paraphrase what they've just said. I put it in my own words. I'll do it with my loved ones when they're distressed or something like that. That's what got me into therapy, actually. I not got me into therapy as a client, although I've done plenty of that. Got me in, got me into the idea of studying it. I started reading books on communication because I wanted to improve my relationship with my own family. It didn't really help that much with that at the time, but it did help me improve all my other relationships. I realized when I listened to people with the intention to understand them, and then was able to pick something, convey something of what they were trying to convey to me back to them skillfully. They, oh, suddenly, such relief. It was just so. It was instant for me to see the impact on the curative, the healing impact. And I came to realize that even if I had no skills or knowledge at all, I could still be of value. I could still be useful. I could still help people just by demonstrating my understanding of them. And so I was coming with that, armed with that, when I came to the end of my undergrad, it seemed obvious that with with an interest in these skills, that a suitable thing for me would be to go and study counselling. So what I found was after they received that sort of catharsis, also it helped them put it together in their own head better, hearing it said back. And sometimes they correct you. Sometimes a technique I really like, and you guys can practice it at home. It's not just for counselors. Is when someone tells you something, say, "Well, it sounds like you feel X because Y," and that's like a formula that you can apply to paraphrasing what the other person said or going for the meaning underneath what they said, trying to convey that back to them. Now, sometimes you might not get it right. They'll say, well, it's not that I feel guilty. I'm actually annoyed about it because, but even if you get it wrong, it's like a point in a radar. By floating it out there, you help them figure out by negation actually where they were. And you'll see that people really love you for this. They're much more apt to take on what you have to say in response, in feedback, and advice if they feel fully understood by you. But I found that many times you can do this two, three, four, five times in, because what will happen is once a person feels understood for one thing and that clarity comes, it helps them dig deeper. So it's kind of like a cake, one of those layered cakes with the sponge and then the icing and then the sponge and then the icing. And it's like, emotion, the content of the mind, and then there's another emotion under there. And you're pulling it out like that wizard, the magician's trick where the little boy pulls a handkerchief from his sleeve and he keeps on pulling and pulling and pulling because it's not just one handkerchief. So that was really like satisfying to me as well to see that you could hold space for people and help them gain a deeper understanding of themselves and feel the energy that it generated, the enthusiasm that it generated, the feeling of like, yeah, I'm getting at it now. I'm beginning to understand myself. So that's another thing that a lot of people can benefit from. I'll let you guys come back because I could probably keep on talking just as long again on the kind of things that people might experience.
Mike, I'm going to let you interject, but first, I just want to say that when folks talk about peeling back the layers on someone, usually they refer to that person as an onion or the thing as an onion. I just want to say I appreciate that you went with a sponge cake because that's far more palatable.
Right. Yeah, far
Michael, go
more
ahead.
palatable.
A trifle, as it's called
Uh-huh.
in my family. Um, uh, Anthony, do you feel that this is just part of the human condition? I mean, obviously, people want to be heard, they want to be
hmm
understood, they want to be known for their true self, or they want to try and access that or communicate that. But is it more a product of modern times that we're so pent up and not heard and insecure about who we are, especially to ourselves and to others? Do you think it's always been this way, or are we just at a phase in whatever civilization is or has been where it's particularly difficult to find that clarity
I
without
think
the help of
both.
someone else?
I think both are true. I think, there's a sense in which there's always been the confessional or someone in the tribe to speak to, the need for confidentiality, because the thing is, if you express yourself in an uncontrolled way towards people that are involved, they there you don't have the clarity and self-integration to communicate skillfully. And there's this idea of like, I don't want to call it radical honesty because I'm not really sure the people that are into that's what they do. But this, oh, just be like fearlessly authentic and say and feel and do it. No, what you're doing with that, to continue the cake metaphor, is you're giving someone some flour, some eggs, and a whisk, and saying, "Here's all my unprocessed emotions. Like, would you do something with this for me?" Now, it's much better to
Right.
have a clearer idea of yourself, which is why we seek external counsel, not to gossip about people, but to help us gain counsel for how to resolve the conflict and put the relationship on a better footing. That being said, we are completely overstimulated now compared to the past. Even if you're a farmer or something like that, you have a lot, you used to, some of you are farmers, you get a lot of time out there in the fields, like we've got nothing to do but think, and chew over your stuff. I don't know. We don't really know what the human condition is. The human condition seems to be adaptation to environment. You go through a lot of stuff in your show about electroculture and lost knowledge. And what was human nature back then? What was human nature back in Atlantis, if existed? Were we just hairy? What was it like when we were hairy barbarians? Are we in an evolution? You know, the liberals during the Enlightenment definitely thought it was progress, 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 and a lot of us were thought that it might be progress, progress, progress up until we got disillusioned. Maybe it was with the response to 9/11. Maybe it was with Obama and the anti-war movement disappearing. Maybe it was Trump. Maybe it was the response to the coronavirus, and you went, "Oh, I thought things were getting better, but I don't know how things are going to get better under the conditions where people are not open to new information." I thought by now the information in the computer on the internet would lead to a lot more progressive schools, because and healthcare reform and things like that. What I would know is one indication that these skills are universal and important to humans left and right is, when I was a classroom assistant, I used them in school. I used them with kids, and I saw that the kids lit up when they were listened to like this. There's people online talking about peaceful parenting and communication with kids, and it's a really big thing to use this sort of skill instead of having an agenda with your kids. Do this. There's a great book called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Kids Will Talk, and that was a huge influence on me, and brought partly brought me into my therapy practice. These are skills that we need from a young age. And Carl Rogers said these aren't just skills for therapists. We should bring them into the workplace so that bosses have these skills. We should bring them into all our institutions so that people can hold the space for each other. So the need is the same, but maybe the society is a corrupting factor in that people do not have these skills. They're not modeled it. People a lot. It used to be maybe in a tribal society, if you grew old, you grew wise because you had to survive in those kinds of conditions. Now it's possible to grow old without growing wise. And for me, and a lot of people might relate to this, when I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of wise, or at least I didn't have a lot of useful adults around. Not a lot of people taught me things. Not a lot of people were patient and asked, well, what's your idea? What's your opinion? I remember when I went to Aikido, I was a teenager, and I first started to grow a goatee beard for the first time. And one of my teachers noticed it, and I said, well, I don't know if it suits me or not yet. I'm just trying it. And he said, it doesn't matter if anyone else likes it. It only matters if you like it. And my jaw almost hit the floor, which is an I, which is an indication that I so rarely heard adults say what you want matters, what you think matters more than what other people think, that was a surprise to me. And I noticed that when I was a piano tutor as well, like a couple of times, if I got impatient with a student and then I apologized to them later, they were like, oh, no, 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 it's fine. But I saw the surprise in their eyes that an adult would actually apologize and say, it's not your fault if I get impatient. That's on me. It's my job to be patient. So if I get impatient, it's not a reflection on you, it's a reflection on me. That was surprising to them. So yes, I would like to think, we could get to a more enlightened place. I think the need for this quality of attention, quality of communion, um, is universal, but we could definitely create a society where it's more acknowledged that this is helpful, and I could and on the basis of that, I can come to more reasons why therapy might be helpful. But you guys come in first.
I think, well, thank you for that. But I'll think the idea of doing anything with a certain amount of attention is disappearing from the hyper fast internet age culture that we reside in. Just in this conversation so far, you mentioned like just talking to the lamppost or the farmer in his field. What I'm noticing, because I have kids and they're in school, is that we're very concerned with like filling up every last minute with productivity, but there's no value placed on any sort of like self-contemplation. Like you mentioned, Antony, speaking to the lamppost or the farmer in his field, where there's just time built into the day to be with yourself, to be with your thoughts, to consider all of it or none of it or whatever. But there's time that's not necessarily wasted time. And like the every day that passes, I thought, why don't we teach kids meditation in school? Like just the practice of sitting alone or in a group quietly for 10 minutes with your eyes closed, without the snickering, without the having it be awkward. I feel like that would really go a long way to making us just more comfortable with ourselves and by extension, more comfortable with other people. But it's become impossibly clear that in this age of like heightened, where division is just at a fever pitch, like we don't even know what ourselves think. I'm speaking in broad strokes, of course, but how can you possibly relate to somebody when you haven't really taken the time to like really collect your thoughts and be okay with the clutter up there?
Yeah, and we're so used to being stimulated that we don't want to be calm. Like, when people start to calm down, they reach for another coffee. And I like a coffee as much as everyone else. Like, I hear that you guys came off it. Well, I mean, I've never been a huge coffee drinker, but do you know what? When I was less meditative, I hardly ever drunk it. And when I became, it's quite interesting that once I worked through my stuff, I became like one or two cup drinker. It's almost like the mind's reaching for homeostasis, like what it's used to. Um, and it's interesting with the kids. Like if you tried to meditate them, they'd get up and they'd want to run around and scream, and they don't get enough of that either, running around
Right.
screaming. Like I feel like
Correct.
to meditate, they're not active enough, and they're on stimulating drugs, a lot of them, and if not, there's the sugar and there's the numbers. So it's like we're so used to being stimulated that when we calm down, we feel there's something wrong, and we re-stimulate ourselves. It's interesting you mentioned this, because when I came into the airport yesterday, I text my buddy and I was like, "I'm sorry, I've got to clear customs. This is taking ages, blah blah." And he's like, "It's cool, man. I'm in the parking lot." And um, he was like, "Oh, it's kind of good, because it's like, when you get sick and you just you're like watching some stuff on TV, you just chilling, and you're like, that part of you which is, I should really be doing something right now, is appeased, because what you're meant to be doing is you're meant to be chilling and catching up on that show or podcast or whatever. You're not meant to be active. That's interesting, isn't it? It's good getting ill because I get a break. And similarly, I kind of felt like that on the plane. It was like, okay, well, I guess I can watch a movie. I've got a limited number of things I can do because I don't have Wi-Fi access, so um, that gives me some downtime. Yeah, as you say, it should be built into the day. But I've got this again, like it's like speed versus haste. I noticed that if I sit down and I go through my to-do lists and I organize my stuff, I'm much more productive than if we get gung ho. So I've got this idea that you want balance first, and then you can bring clarity to your mind, and then you can start to take action. Like again with the therapy, the becoming self-integrated, that focused attention. Yes, you should. It's very, very good to learn to give yourself that attention with some kind of meditative practice, and it definitely can help you um, unpeel layers of the mind, or layers of the layer cake, as we've been, to sit in silence and just experience what your experience is like. Similarly, you're experiencing this being guided into yourself, or so that you can experience that balance, feeling balance, so that clarity comes to the mind. And when you act, a lot of people, one of my favorites experiences is when people come into the session like feeling a bit of a mess, but I can see that they leave feeling like they know what they're doing, you know? So that's another thing. Like on the point of quality attention, I think that attention, and this is one of the benefits of meditation, attention is for humans what sunlight is for flowers, sunlight is for plants. They come into fruition when they get high quality attention. A lot of the people that come to me for counseling online are people like us who are a little bit more switched on than the average person, and maybe they've always been like that, but because they were switched on, because they had perception, their need for high quality attention was greater. Because who are you going to speak this to? You need a good adult, or someone to say, "Hey, I noticed this. Hey, I noticed that." Someone that's not going to go, "All right, yeah, that's great. Go back to class." But someone's going, "Oh, that's really interesting," and ask them a question, and be curious about them. Not just like fob them off and go, "Oh, that's nice. So why don't you draw a picture?" But so, given that attention is a nutrient, it's like I would say a lot of the people that have come to me are very smart. Some of them and a lot of them are very compassionate, but they know they could come into fruition. They're deficient in high quality attention, and I see people come into themselves, come into their own. more integrated through the process of getting like the highest quality supplements, for attention, like a intravenous injection of high quality attention, so they can work through their stuff and come their seeds, seeds can last for ages, years, centuries sometimes, but once they find fertile ground, they start to germinate, they start to grow. And as soon as you water those seeds, so to speak, yeah, a lot of the time, that's more like developmental. People come more alive, they become more capable.
Become more inspired too. I would suspect. Yeah, Ben, I want to let you jump in here too, but I do appreciate what you said about it's not always your spouse or your family that's the best choice to necessarily go deep with, for lack of a better term. I shouldn't say that. I mean, there's
On
room
some
for all
issues,
of it. But
absolutely, definitely, it's complementary. It's not instead of. This can help people have. I've seen a lot of people have improved a lot of relationships after going to therapy because they learn how to be listened to and they learn what that feels like, and so they can seek it more effectively with their loved ones and they can also give it better. Please go
yeah,
on.
no, complimentary is a beautiful way to put it. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
No, that's actually a great point. Is that but I've never thought of it this way. I always think of therapy as a one-way transaction where I'm dumping my stuff onto a therapist. But in fact, if you go into it with a really open mind and you're a receptive individual, you can actually take a skill from this. Like watching the therapist listen to me, I can become the better listener and take some of those skills, as you've just taught us, Antony, in this one conversation. You say this, so I feel like you might feel this. Like that's a skill that one would take from a therapy session and then apply it to relationships in real life, whether that's your friends or your family, a son or a daughter or a spouse.
And your supplement point is well taken too. I think the cliche about one needing or going to therapy is I'm fucked up. I have problems. I need a therapist. That's sort of how it's presented in the mainstream culture. What you're presenting is no, I'm a fucking badass. I'm awesome. I'm high level. I need to level up. I need that sustenance to do even better work in this world.
Yeah, and a lot of people do some people come to me because they're in a tight spot. Some people come to me on and off over years, and they take breaks, and then when they feel like they could benefit from it, they come back online. And some people are like, yeah, no, I think things are pretty good, but I know I could be getting a lot more of life. And that's kind of like developmental. So there's like remedial, where there's some problem that we're going to fix. And there's developmental, where you've got a foundation but you want to build on that. But let's face it, it's never that simple. All of life is developmental and remedial. You're developmental in some areas and you need remedy in other. It's true. And you need to go out and weed the garden, before you grow flowers. But the whole process of gardening runs together. You're weeding while you're planting, and you're planting while you're tending while you're weeding. And I imagine I've not done tons of gardening, and not as much as I would like to. But it's I like the sentiment that you don't need to think of it just as something for yourself. When for fucked up people, everyone is fucked up to some degree. You don't get out of this society unscathed, but a lot of people definitely come because they feel like they could do more with their talents if they had more clarity and more support. And that's the thing, like, I'm not like, for me, like, giving advice is not a huge part of it. But if I know something that I think would help someone, I don't keep it to myself. I've also got a lot of experience in self-healing, a lot of experience in meditation and different modes of contemplation, journaling, different techniques and things like that. So sometimes it's about choosing the right tool for the job, and and being flexible with your approach. So yeah, and then there's just like
expanding your thinking. So I was trying to, like, because you need to ask questions. A lot of it's paraphrasing and coming back to um, reflecting someone back to themselves. But then at some point, you want to ask people questions that are going to send their mind off in directions they never would have thought of to go. Or maybe you notice something that they're not noticing. Sometimes you need to challenge them. They said two things that seem to contradict each other. Sometimes someone needs a reality check because they're in a situation where they're being mistreated, but they don't know how to read it. They're like, oh, am I being too emotional? Am I being like this? Like they're cutting the other person too much slack. And they need a firmer hand, which I don't do too often. That means it has a real impact when I do it.
Right.
And I say, well, do you mind if I challenge you on something you've said there? Or do you want to know what I really think? And because I've got trust with people, they'll be like, yeah, of course I do. Well, if you want to know what I really think, I think they're being like this. And, and I won't be afraid to do that with people, point out, contradict. Well, you said this, but you also said this, and these seem to be in contradiction. Would you like to tell me more about that? And it's like, oh, that helps people understand the multiple different directions that they're pulled in, and they may have conflicting or different takes on a situation at the same time. So that helps people get straight with themselves and understand themselves better so that they can act. It's not like they've got one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake because they're pulled in different directions. So these are some of the kinds of things that people can benefit from in therapy, and by extension of that, you can conclude who might benefit from therapy. Yeah, it's looking at things from a bunch of different angles. Asking questions helps to do that. And then another thing is to confront anything that you've been avoiding. There's things like hanging around in your back of your head. You're like, I really should look at that, but it seems a bit scary. And sometimes people are more likely to do that when they've got someone sitting there, or if they're not, I might notice. I remember you mentioned this another time. Should we maybe check in on that issue, or like come back to that thing? Like that might be, oh yeah, I can feel when we're talking around the issue. So there's lots of different approaches, and there's lots of different things, different ways that people can benefit from. And I feel like it's a beautiful process to watch unfold, because I really feel like if you do that, one, listen with the intention to understand, which is to give them lots of space to speak and articulate themselves. Sometimes something is just outside the edge of their awareness. I can see that they're poking around it. And the longer I've been doing it for, the wider my radar goes. So I can pull something that's they're trying to get towards, and they're poking around. I go, I think you're trying to say this. Present it to them. They're like, wow, boom. I'm like, oh, it's not that. I'm just saying what you were saying. I'm just saying what you were trying to say. So that's quite beautiful. To see it unfold, once people have received that quality of attention, and they become receptive for you for me as a practitioner to do something, whether it's challenge them or ask them a question or relay some information that's relevant, or something, who knows what. That's the beautiful thing about it. I never know what I'm going to say until we're done and that connection is made. And I try and be very in the moment. And then once we've come to that meeting where, someone's shoulders come down and they've stopped talking and they're looking at you, they're receptive. Oh, it's my turn. And usually there's been a bunch of things that I've thought, but I've gone, right, just put a pin in that, put that over there. And then sometimes if it's still relevant, then pick it up and bring it back. And sometimes that's just something you're thinking. So now that you're in the moment and the connection's made, what's going to emerge from that? And I try and be in the moment and pick the right tool for the right moment for the job. So that's a very interesting thing about it as well.
Anthony, in an ideal world, everyone who gravitated towards profession of therapist would be perfectly equipped for that job and that role. But we don't live in an ideal world. And so on behalf of a listener who might be thinking, oh yeah, I'd like to try out therapy. How does one find, quote unquote, the right therapist for them? Like, what are some of the qualities that you should look for? And, or when you're in that first session, like, how do you know that you
Yeah.
found the right therapist?
Yeah, I once did a podcast for Be Yourself and Love It podcast called 5 Questions to Ask Your Therapist. Now it's been a couple of years, I can't remember what they are, but so I should refresh myself on them. But I think one of the things is, do you feel heard by this person? Do you feel like you're becoming more confident in your own ability to make your own judgments and trust in them? Do they empower you to feel like you've got this? Or do they have a strong agenda with you, and are they pushing you in certain directions and trying to substitute their judgment for your judgment? Because that's a really dangerous game, and I don't like it. And I think there was a time where that was the prevalent form of therapy. The therapist is the expert, and the patient is treated by the therapist. And it went very out of fashion. And that's no small thanks to Carl Rogers. But also, when people discovered these tools of holding the space well, like Carl Rogers, like myself, they found that they're usually more effective. It's usually more effective to hold the space and to help bring out the client's expertise. But some people, they've already gone through difficulties in relationships, and they've been vulnerable, and they've had issues with authority, and they're not that confident. And the therapist can make them doubt themselves, or do, are they able to hold space for difficult emotions without giving you a look on the bright side story? Can they just sit and allow you to be in that space and have the confidence that if you really fully process your grief, um, with their help, with their supervision, you'll come out of the negativity yourself. You don't need to be prompted to come out of the negativity, because everyone does that. Everyone tries to teach you to be positive, to say, oh, don't think, look at it like that, look at it like this. But for someone to say, the cliche, yeah, that sucks, or what, I can, yeah, to put in their own words why it is difficult for you, they help you take yourself seriously. If you feel like you're becoming more confident and competent in your ability uh, to make decisions in life and deal with the consequences of those decisions, then you've probably got a good therapist. If you're, yeah, I mean, even for myself, a lot of the time, clients ask me opinion, and I'm not huge on answering that right away. Like, I mean, I don't want to hold anything back that might help them, but a lot of the time, I'll turn the question back on them and try and find out what they think first, or ask a leading question, a few leading questions to get more information and make sure they've got their stuff on their table before jumping in. So that's one thing. And another, I had a therapist that wouldn't let me get angry at my mum. It was dreadful, terrible, because I came out of the session more confused than I left, and then I had to process the session for weeks. So I've learned from mistakes like that. Like, I would let someone get angry and find out more about it, what it's like. We all want to forgive, because holding on to a grudge is burdensome, but it's a process. And how does that process take place? And in my experience, it doesn't come from blocking the flow of emotion. So those are some things to watch out for. I'm sure there's a bunch of more red flags, but I might be a suitable candidate for you. You never know from listening to the show, if you resonate with what you've heard so far.
Yeah, reach out if anyone out there is listening and thinking about therapy. I certainly urge you to reach out to Anthony. Anthony, we're sort of entrenched in this freedom space. Folks in the freedom space love to talk about authority. And in that therapy session, who has the authority, the client or the
Right.
therapist?
And yeah, and this is exactly what we're speaking about. I want to empower the client. Like, I see the client as the authority on themselves, and I'm like there to help them discover their wisdom. Uh, to have I don't like to push back when clients are not, like, if I make a suggestion, which, again, I prefer not to do too often, but sometimes, if they're like, nah, I don't want to do that because X, Y, and Z, I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, it's their life. It's their life. I want to help them feel competent to take responsibility for their life. So for me, like, I'm the authority on what I know. I've got certain skills that I'm authoritative using. But for me, the client is the authority on themselves and the authority on their lives. And I want to empower them to feel like they're the authority in their life. And in ancient history of psychotherapy, the therapist was the authority, and the therapist treated patients, diagnosed and treated patients. But as the humanistic movement, and I think it was a wonderful time, in the 50s, 60s, when all these ideas were coming out and people were very optimistic about the future, and they thought we could we could remake humanity so wonderfully with knowledge of the social sciences, the way things were going. And they were unlocking the secrets of the mind when they found, oh, you can make the client the authority. You can make children the authority. You can have bosses that cooperate rather than put authority on workers. But sadly, in many ways, despite these ideas beginning in the 60s, and then when I got on YouTube 2007, 2008, I was obsessive for these ideas, and the way that they could be applied to child rearing, to schools, healthcare, the workplace. I thought I was just in the beginning. I thought everyone was going to get it eventually. It seems like we've backslid, but I think we can bring it back. I think I want to bring back Be Yourself and Love It podcast and talk about this sort of thing, like the the quality of attention required to transform people and institutions to help them be authoritative and take authority. Yeah, yeah, and authoritative in making transformation, because evil has no problem being authoritative. It's when you want to do something good, you start questioning your own motives. People start saying, are you getting paid by a supplement company? Never mind that pharma reps are getting six-figure salaries, and several $1,000s expenses account to schmooze people and bribe them to prescribe poisons. It's you who's trying to do some good. I'm sure at one point, Ben Hardy, you got sent some free products from some naturopath, and that's why you've got them on your show.
No, it's actually that last point is an interesting one. Mike and I were just talking about this before you came on. We see folks in this space who are genuine, like yourself and others who we've had on this show, who are genuinely trying to do good and help people, and they take criticism because they also charge for their services or
Yeah,
for their
what?
product. And we're trying. I think we were both just trying to figure out what that is. And I think there's part of it might just be envy or jealousy that you see someone who is doing good and also being successful and trying to earn a living and make some money off of that. And maybe it's just manifesting in criticism or a trolling comment. But it is something that the folks, this movement, the people on the side of good need to do is understand that we all have to eat, we all have to keep the lights on, and it's okay to make a buck trying to also help people. That's
It would be
okay.
great. It would be great if more people could make a buck trying to help people, because then there would be more people helping people. I've been thinking about this a lot over the last couple of months, and sometimes when in the face of when you see how much money there is for evil, and it can be drained out, you could get huge handouts from the state, you can get bribes from corporations. Just think about like I was just reading yesterday because I write about pharma and stuff about malpractice suits and how less than 50% of the money actually goes to the victim of malpractice. So there's all these hangers on making money, making huge, huge sums of money and making everyone else less wealthy. And as soon as you try and do any good, I mean, who's going to do the study on whether you should take binders while you're water fasting? Like, who detoxes more? Should you take chlorella at night in high doses, or will that break the fast? Will that be better in terms of detox or worse? Who's going to fund the study? But it's a difficult world. So in a way, that's what I mean by the clients, the authority, and being empowered to take responsibility for your life. That means I know what my intentions are because I talked about it in therapy. I know that I've taken into account my sister's feelings and things like that. So when I'm moving away, I'm not doing it to hurt her. If she's hurt, then I'm sorry about that and I'm willing to have that conversation. And if she's not, then I can't really do anything about that. I've taken responsibility for what's in my hands, right? Then you have authority. Then you can live. Then you can do good because you're not cynically going, oh, well, you're just doing that because blah, blah, blah. I could probably have been a good pharma rep. I love having dinner with people and schmoozing and talking and yeah, unfortunately, I don't believe in the product. But if someone has a product that is as lucrative as pharmaceuticals and needs a rep, come call me. Maybe we can do some trainings for your staff as well.
I do. I mean, to state the obvious, just knowing that there's a therapist, I almost feel like the word therapist is maybe too limited of a word for what you offer. I haven't thought of what a better word will be. I'll think on that. But just the fact that you're a terrain steeped therapist, to use the word, fills me, just knowing that you're out there fills me with so much joy. Just the fact that you think about chlorella and fasting and that what's top of mind for you. My one experience going to therapy when I was having sort of a rough time in my relationship back in my 20s, it was a very long time ago, but it was like 3 sessions. Then he wanted to put me on drugs, period. That's all I remember.
That's terrible. Oh, that's so dreadful. That's so
and
bad.
Just knowing that that's not even part of your lexicon.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. Makes me have a little bit of hope for the field at large.
Yeah, and I'd love to serve this community. I mean, I guess that's my intention going forward with the pharma book coming out. Like, I want to serve our community. I want to help bring empowerment to the freedom movement and to the terrain movement. That's what I'd like to be doing going forward. And if I can do more trainings than just therapy, start doing little courses on communication and relationships and things like that, I'd really like it. But it's shocking when you think these people who are prescribing drugs, in America they're getting a copay, which is often equal to what people just charge for counselling in other countries in the UK. So they're making huge sums of money to basically enrich pharmaceutical companies and make people sicker over the long term. It's really quite sad. So I appreciate your saying that. Yeah, and it's an exciting prospect when you put it like that. Of me being, and I agree with you. I don't really like these terms: therapist, counselor, coach, psychotherapist. I use them because you said if a hat fits, wear it, or we need to call it something. If I could invent another word, maybe I would. So yeah, you can.
Well, even just attaching we will, and we'll encourage
maybe
listeners.
I'll call myself a terrain therapist.
I was just gonna say, let's just stick terrain in front of it. Terrain therapist, I think, might take you far. We figured it out. We did it.
Okay. Yeah. The thing is, it sounds like some form of naturopath. I remember in alphabetic he says I practice bioterrain medicine. Is that like now? Is it going to be bioterrain therapy, bioterrain psychotherapy? The therapy is so vague because what are you therapizing? You know, there's a massage therapist and a crystal therapist and a Reiki therapist, and so. I like the concept of the word, which is that it's something that has a therapeutic effect on the psyche. I just don't really like all the baggage that comes
Yeah.
along with that.
Anthony, one of the topics that we wanted to hit, and I think this was one that you suggested, is the big theory psychologists like Jung is
Oh yeah.
popular again. You remember partially because folks like Jordan Peterson, and wanted to know what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So there's all these like big, what I call, but I didn't get this from somewhere. It's just what I call them, like big theory psychologists like Jung, Freud, before how they've got all of these theories about how the psyche works and like all the what is it in Jung? It's like archetypes and like stuff like that. And to me, it's like just trawling through mythology. I'm not going to say that none of this stuff is useful, but the reason why I included it in the supporting material, it comes back to the sort of dichotomy between therapist diagnosing and the client being the authority. Like, I feel if as soon as you're looking at someone through a theory, you're not meeting them where they are. Like, that's why I want to be a human to a human in my practice. Like, that's why I talked about all the stuff about listening properly, taking it in. I don't want to be sitting there like listening to what they're saying, going, "Oh, this ties into this archetype and that ties into the like this general precept of some elaborate big theory." And I don't doubt that Jung was a genius and that a lot of these big theory psychologists have insights, but then I think maybe it's helpful for people to study themselves to be able to categorize the content of their mind. And yet, maybe you can bring it in once you've done all that person to person connection stuff. But people just need, I was going to say meat and potatoes, but in the terrain world, like anything you say about diet is going to get instantly questioned. What I mean is, people just need bread and butter. You can't even say bread and butter, stuff. Which is they need to be listened to and they need to be understood. They need to feel the other person understands them. They need to be asked questions to expand their perception. They need to be challenged on any contradictions. They sometimes need advice. They sometimes need to find out where they need to get more information or guidance, etc. They don't need big elaborate theories. It's like if someone's bleeding to death and you refuse to bandage them because you've got some elaborate like theory of like, oh no, but what's their BMI and their risk for diabetes and this what's their genetic code because they may have susceptibility to this. It's like, just bandage the freaking wound, son. It's like, so that's why I sometimes get frustrated. The thing is about the big theories, they provoke a sense of wonder. Oh wow, all of these archetypes. Oh, it's like a big Aladdin's cave. There's so much to find out there. And we do owe a lot to psychodynamic theory, like from Freud, people like Freud. I mean, the idea of denial, the idea of projection, of of identification, like you identify with your abuser and then you feel their feelings instead of yours. So there is a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of useful concepts in the big theory psychologists. I just feel like we need to be careful in our application of them so that it doesn't become so that psychotherapy doesn't become like um a personality test where you're trying to see what boxes they tick And then, oh, I know you're this, you're a ENFP, therefore what we need is this kind of treatment. You're a this, so yeah, so that's my feeling on those kind of like big elaborate theories.
There's also the danger of appealing to authority when you're coming at it from that vantage.
Very
Well, these
much
people
so.
are legendary, so certainly I should defer to their wisdom of what's come, and then you stop relying on your own intuition.
And that's what you used to want to be, you know, a great psychotherapist, a great healer. I'm going to go in and listen to people and figure them out and get inside their head and see what makes them tick. And then I'm going to tell them what makes them tick. And they're going to go, wow, I'm so blown away by your insight, doctor. And then they're going to be cured. But what I've found is with those insights, people go, wow, wow, so true. And then they just go back to the same the next day. It's better if you can provoke the client to have their own insights and go, wow, I just figured it out. You know, that's much more empowering and doesn't require the authority figure to keep on coming in and healing them, but just to encourage them along their way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Anthony, so we're almost at an hour here, and I have a question for you. Re-listening to the first time you were on a year ago, you had 3 non-negotiables, 3 daily habits that you were doing at the time to tend to your terrain. And I don't know if you remember, but here they are. One was to slow down your breathing regularly through the day. One was to eat some high water content food. And then the last one was to just do some stretching. And I'm curious to know if you've added any new non-negotiables to your daily habits.
Those are really good. I was fasting when I was doing those, and I was really, really enjoying them. I still eat high water content fruit every day. It's good to remind myself to get back on the fasting, and I also still practice with my breath. I actually got what like pranayama, that's like breath work teacher training in India. So I'd love to go and upgrade to an even better certificate one day. But yeah, I really like doing the breath stuff. What's non-negotiable today? Worrying. I worry every day without without negotiation. And I want to do less of that. So I'm going to apply some of my own medicine. That's not something I recommend you make a non-negotiate. Rather than worry, negotiate with yourself. You can grab a piece of paper that's about organizing the content of your mind and do a little role play where you play as each other version of you that's got a different idea and learn to speak back to yourself. Okay, I speak about what's going on to myself with loved ones that I know can hold the space. I've got a lot of different friends, and you get to realize, especially doing this job, that not everyone needs to be able to do everything. There's some people that when you come to them, they will just give you advice or tell you to look on the bright side, and that's fine. They're maybe not the people to talk to that kind of stuff about, but I do have people in my life that can receive me, so I'm glad to share with them. I enjoy so where are we? Where are we with the number of negotiables?
It seems like going to a sunny place in the wintertime is a non-negotiable for you.
Oh well, it looks like going to a sunny place in the wintertime is a non-negotiable about me, because I'm definitely affected by seasonal affective disorder, SAD as we like to call it. So already feeling a lot better in the sunshine in Florida. So those are some good things to think about, I guess.
Yeah, I love it. And Antony, once again, for the listener, where's the best place for them to learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, go check out beyourselfandloveit.com if you think that counseling might be something that you would benefit from. I've got a website there with a form, and you can book an appointment, and then we'll figure it out. If you want to speak to me personally, beyourselfandloveit.com.
Antony Sammeroff, terrain therapist. Thank you so much for joining us on the Terrain Theory podcast.
Thank you so much for having me back. It was a very thrilling conversation and got me excited about the whole thing, the whole project of healing the world again.
after party in the Pioneer Room. You are in the Pioneer Room. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the after party in the Pioneer Room. Dr. Merenda,
Dr. Hardy,
how you doing?
I'm great.
I love it. Well, speaking of feeling supported, that was fun. It was fun to have Antony on and really dive into his area of expertise.
Absolutely. And it's great to have a repeat guest as well, too, because you get to know somebody and then we're following each other's journeys as well.
Yeah. And he goes, my personal opinion, he goes a long way into redefining a therapist, into redefining and maybe even just like restoring what it is that, my opinion of what a therapist is and does. And I think we're already at a point, I think, in society where we've normalized like mental health issues, normalized and accepted. Like this is just a part of our society. We don't stigmatize it anymore. And I think maybe in my mind, the therapist had a stigma attached to it. Like you go to a therapist when you're broken,
right?
And that's not the case. That doesn't need to be the case. And so that door is open for me. And I think I've described to you and maybe to the listener, like, and I think it was maybe when my dad was on and we talked about when Josh died and we had that like group session and Nate and I were there. And it was just like, I'm looking around going, there are kids who lost both their parents in a house fire, like, what am I doing here? And that was it. That was the beginning and the end of any sort of therapy I've ever done in my entire life. And you accumulate some stuff over the years. It's the more I go on, the more I'm like, I could probably benefit from like talking to someone who doesn't already know me or doesn't have an agenda.
And again, not just when tragedy has struck, but just as a run of the mill work a day. Let's just have a conversation with. It's again like trying to recontextualize what it is he's offering, because that word therapist is so loaded, but just like a conscious listener, have a respectful exchange, someone to hold the space so you can sort of like, again, not fix what's broken, but try and build upon what's already there.
Yeah. And ultimately, and it just seems like ultimately the goal for all of us is to better know yourself. That's the goal. Know thyself. And I think some people can arrive there earlier than others, but then again, we're always evolving. So there's always something new about yourself to discover. And it seems to me anyway, that the benefit of having someone like Antony, who is an intentional listener, who's just trying to understand you, is that they know when to hold that mirror up, perhaps, and can show you something, can just repackage something that you've said in a way that makes you go, oh yeah, that really is what's going on, or that really is who I am, or that really is what I want. And I think that might be the benefit of just someone who can help you along that journey to better know yourself first and foremost.
With a certain level of detachment too, someone who's not your best friend or your spouse or your family. Yeah. I think there's real value in that.
Yeah. Yes, there is. And as you pointed out, the added value to having someone like Antony is that he's also hip to this terrain thing. So not only is he not going to like push you in the direction of a medicine or medication, he's also going to be able to talk away. He's just talk about how you're, talk about the world, see the world the same way you do. Correct. Through this like very important new lens.
And that was a big part of what Victoria mentioned, right? Is that she didn't have many people to discuss these new revelations about how the world may or may not actually work. And that was a huge part of her journey, is finding someone to just air it out with.
Yeah. Yeah.
That you can trust, and you're not going to be judged if I think you're crazy. Someone who is like I forget the phrase that Antony is up-leveled or something like that. Yeah.
Right. For me, I would have to turn to someone like Antony, because I live on a dirt road and there aren't any lampposts for me to talk to.
So many trees, though.
There are plenty of trees. Well, actually, that was the thing I was thinking about when you mentioned how, or you observed, or asked really if he observed whether or not more people are turning to therapy. Are more people turning to therapy because of the state of the world? And I was thinking that we were more attached to nature when we lived in nature. It was like reality was right before us, and I feel like maybe there was a more objective truth. Like, that's a tree, that's a lion, that's a plant. Like, it's right there before us. We're in this digital space now where you don't know what truth is. Like, we're even those of us who are quote unquote more plugged in, as Anthony would say, or who think that we're awake, or whatever word we want to use, we could still, like, we're on our screens and we're subjected to things and videos and content that we don't know is true. Correct. So there's a greater detachment from reality itself. And so going to a therapist, part of it is like, I don't even know, like, I don't know where the ground is underneath my feet anymore. So let's just start there.
Yeah.
And you could see where more and more folks would want to turn to therapy because they can't even tell what is true anymore.
That is a great observation. Yeah.
Well, folks, nothing you heard here should be taken as medical advice, as neither Mike nor I are medical experts. Remember that you are light, you are love, you are your primary healthcare provider. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one.